Hey guys, welcome back to another Seedsman Sessions. Thank you so much for coming along and joining us. And thank you very much also for all of the amazing feedback we've been getting for these interviews we've been doing with some of the most incredible people in an industry that we all care very much about, and in a world that we all care very much about. And some of the people we've been talking to have been, really inspirational and special. And tonight is no exception. I can't tell you how excited I am. The person we'll be talking to tonight it's hard to describe how important they are right now, where we are in the world, and what's been going on with the industry. They've had such an influence on the industry, and they're so well known within the industry in a small way, but also maybe not so well to know some of you guys out there. And the person we're going to talk to tonight is Michka. And Michka is well known within the industry as the Grand Dame of Cannabis. So a lot of you will know exactly who I'm talking about, and some of you may not. But Michka is a very important person and has had a huge influence on the way that things have turned out in the cannabis industry more recently, and has seen things change, and has also had one of the most unbelievable, inspirational, adventurous lives. And you're going to find out about that more tonight. We're going to talk about her life and what she's been doing, and just this incredible life that she led, and no holds barred, adventuring and freedom, and fighting the good fight, and still now, as she is absolutely central in our world to making sure that people have access to information, and the people out there that want to publish books and putting out literature, that she is publishing work for people and making sure that people all around the world have access to cannabis information and real knowledge. So yeah, Michka is one of the most important people, in my opinion, in the cannabis industry, and as you're about to find out, has had one of the most amazing lives as well, and I think that's what I want to find out about tonight when we talk to her. So I'd like to bring in Michka and ask her to talk a little bit about herself, and hopefully give you guys an amazing insight into what has been an incredible life so far, with many more adventures to come, I hope so. Hello Michka. Hello, how are you?
I'm quite well, thank you. It's been a good day in Paris with a lot of sun.
Good. Fantastic. Yes, I think a little in Europe now, a little good, better weather is making everyone happy. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real privilege to have you here. And I've explained a little bit to the people who are watching now and the people who will be listening to what we're talking about, the very basics of your life. But would you give everyone a very quick mini bio of who you are and what you're doing now, and how you started in the industry? And then we'll talk more about your life.
I'm a woman, as you can see, a woman with a sense of adventure. Cannabis has been a friend and an ally for me for about 50 years. Words are very important for me. Books have been my masters. I care for books a lot, not only as a writer, but as a reader. And now as a publisher for 20 years ago, together with Grande, we founded a publishing company in Paris.
So you say this, most of what you're publishing now is cannabis-based literature, or is it medical cannabis-based literature, or is it... we'll talk a bit later about the publishing company, I think, but basically what you're doing now is publishing people that maybe weren't being able to be published by other houses in the past, I think, quite a lot. So people were struggling to have their books published, and you would step in and help out a lot. But I think what we'd like to do is, I want to talk a little bit about your early life before we get into what you're doing now and these incredible things and adventures and this amazing business you've built. Let's talk about how Michka got into her first adventures. And when you're in your early years, what was your first huge adventure that you went on? Before cannabis and before everything. You were a young lady.
I think in a way, it all started in England. I was living in Gosport at the time with an Englishman, and we bought an old sailboat from 1896, so really old and really small. And we did it up, and we sailed across the channel.
I think we can show some photographs of your first boat, I think, on the screen here. Really beautiful little boat as well, huh?
And those years on the sailboat were really major for me, because that's when I discovered that there was another way of life. That I discovered freedom, really.
Mm-hmm. Had you come from a conservative background, or were your family more conservative? Were your family fairly liberal? And
They were fairly liberal, and any question was a good question to ask, and that's really important when you grow up.
so they were excited when you started to go on your adventures, or you said, if you found this boat, they were excited for you. They weren't worried, or
No, they weren't excited, and yes, they were worried.
like parents, I suppose. Even now, maybe. But this was a fairly, now everyone thinks about going on adventures and, I would take a boat. And this was, quite unusual in those days, I think. You maybe even know it was the early days. But so your first adventure, you took the boat down to Europe. Where did you go from there?
So we started from England, and we sailed to France and went down the Atlantic coast and into a canal that took us to the Mediterranean Sea, and from there to the Balearic. And there we sold the boat, and we actually immigrated to British Columbia, Canada.
Yeah.
And that's where I discovered weed.
And this is the beginning of the story. So you went over to British Columbia, and you had some money from selling the boats. And did you know what just going to just disappear into the wilderness? And what was your plan when you first arrived there?
At the time, we were both teachers, teaching French as a foreign language. And so we got jobs right away in the north of British Columbia, where nobody chooses to go. So when you get there, you can always find a job.
Yeah, of course.
And then we started building a much bigger boat, 40-foot.
I think we have a photograph somewhere of this boat, maybe, hopefully.
The photo you showed before, that was that second boat that we built from scratch.
Oh, it was the original. Okay. This one here is the second. This is the 40-foot.
Yes,
is this the one?
And we sailed it.
Wow.
We went down to the Panama Canal.
You built from scratch yourselves?
Yes.
Incredible.
Sailed it went to the Panama Canal, crossed over to the Atlantic, and then sailed over to Europe.
Back to Europe. Oh, wow. And then did you go all around Europe in the boats? Was that the plan originally, or just to move around?
Then we went to the Mediterranean and Tunisia and down the Seine to Paris. That was back to my hometown. It was really exciting.
Like a homecoming. Incredible. And then you went back to British Columbia, I believe, to live over there. Yeah.
I went back to British Columbia with the man who was going to become the father of my kid. And that's when we went a bit into the wilderness and built a cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, building a cabin, once you've built a boat, it's really easy, because a boat is all curved. You have a curve like this and a curve like this. A cabin, it's all straight and square, so it's easy.
You're very modest when you say these things. I mean, yes, I know from personal experience in building a boat and family experience, building a boat is very, very difficult. Building a cabin is also a lot of very hard work, especially in the wilderness. And
it was a simple cabin, so it was easy.
But it's also very beautiful. And I think,
yes, with a sense of aesthetics as well. It's quite fun to have aesthetics in the middle of the forest.
Yeah. The quality of life is perfect.
Contrasts are the salt of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The photographs I looked at, they're just so beautiful. And like you say, you're in this incredible location, and it's a homemade house, and it's self-sufficient almost. Were you able to work when you were in the cabin, or were you just living off savings, and were you able to keep a lifestyle going? And you were starting to have a family as well at this point, I believe.
At first, we were living off savings. And then being a writer, you can do that anywhere.
Okay. So I believe that your first book you published is in 1978, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I was born in 1978, but I believe the book was a reasonable success and fairly kind of groundbreaking, from what I understand from reading.
Yes, it was quite a success, and people are still reading it. It was a book about taking off and living on the water.
Okay. And it was, so it's like a self-sufficiency book, which now is a huge thing that people are doing. It's become a huge thing on social media, and people are rediscovering this self-sufficiency.
Yes, exactly.
And taking a small vehicle and not necessarily being part of the big commercial scene and tourism and seeing the world a bit more. It's one of my great sadnesses that the original hippie trail, or the traveling trail through Europe, through the central Middle East and down into Central Asia, and is not so easy and safe for people now. But it was such this idea of moving around, and certainly in your life, from what I've seen, is you really lived on the land and really had it.
It was really exciting in the 70s, the Back to the Land movement, and to be part of it. And for many years, I thought I would see another Back to the Land movement, and I was really surprised not to see any. And now it's happening.
It's starting again.
Now there is an exodus from cities again.
Yeah. People's reconnection with nature is happening.
It took a long time.
Yeah, I think there was a huge marketing push to bring people to towns. It was all about, must come to the city, be part of the culture. If you're not in the city,
the excitement of the city.
Yeah, of course,
the speed of the city.
Yeah, if you're not here, you're missing out.
Yes.
But then now I think we understand more. So you were living in the wilderness. You're starting to write. You're starting to have a family. This is like we haven't really talked about cannabis too much. You said at this point you discovered cannabis, but at that point really it was more, I think for you, was more like just a consumption thing and understanding, starting to try it out for yourself. Or was it, how long did it take you before you went from trying the first time to really becoming serious about, this is something I want to be involved with, that, and then to activism? Or
well, the first talk I took, I was scared really because of what I had heard in France about drugs. So I didn't feel anything. I think I just pretended. And the second didn't work either. But the third time, I knew I liked it right away. And I knew I made a friend. And something that people don't realize perhaps now so much is that all the changes that were in the air, like people doing things together instead of doing things against one another, and make love not war, which is really revolutionary.
One of the most important quotes, and still the most important quotes, I think, really.
All those changes were carried by marijuana. At that time, if I met someone who smoked, I knew we had the same outlook on life. And that made weed particularly precious.
Yeah. So almost a feeling of community amongst the people that are using themselves. I still have this feeling sometimes when I'm in places. Especially in Europe, it's a feeling sometimes when you meet someone else who is just using for healthy reasons, and it's a feeling of coming together with someone with who will understand a similar kind of conversations and a similar sort of attitude, maybe even with difference of opinion. If you're with someone who's a smoker rather than a user of other things, or
so. There is some of that sense of kinship still.
Yeah. So you realized that cannabis was going to be a part of your life at this stage. It was good for
Yeah.
you. You liked it.
And so what we smoked at the time came from Mexico. And nobody knew about Sinsemilla. It came with,
In Canada, really, even then.
yes,
Yeah.
it came with twigs and a lot of seed, and you had to sort it out. Put the weed, go like this, and let it
Yeah,
sit,
we just do over a newspaper.
and then roll the seeds off.
Yeah. We used to make like a newspaper in half over in your knees, and then rub, 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 rub. So all the seeds went down the newspaper. Or on a frisbee is a good one as well.
But that being said, one shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that the smoke was not as good as today's. In my opinion, it was better. It was better because it was sativa, and it was a very creative weed, and it sort of opened up your consciousness.
I agree personally. For me, again, everyone has a different feeling, but personally, I know I'm probably older than I look, but I remember much more the imported landrace strain, African strains, and Asian weed, and even those days, and it was really beautiful highs, which you don't get so much now. And since then, I've always searched for sativas and outdoor sativas and landrace sativas myself. But I agree, and the creativity side also for me is very important. But I think for many of our viewers as well. And I agree, it was different in those days.
The search has been for cannabis that grows fast,
Yes.
and that to the detriment of the effect it has on you when you smoke it.
Yeah. I think the search for the strength. We talked about this previously with someone else I was talking with, and in the past you could only test for THC. So when there was the beginning of the marketing of cannabis, so in the Dutch scene and then the beginning of the American scene, it was about how much THC you can test for. So the breeders were just growing for THC content,
Yeah,
and they
the
didn't
red
understand.
THC.
Yeah, and then obviously for people who wanted to buy seeds, it was about yield. So I think it's fairly well known, and I think we're going backwards now a little bit. And I think really there's a big interest in landrace genetics and original genetics, and some of the old genetics are now the lost genetics, but people want to find these things, and the sativas. I know that you know I've known some of the most incredible people in the industry over your life, and some of those people have been involved in. And Neville, I think, is someone that is easy to say. As a name, and the people, there's Neville Schumacher. It's one of the most important breeders, and many people will not know who we're talking about. But so we're in Canada. You're finding cannabis is important for you. It's more than just something you enjoy doing. Before we go into Neville, I think we should talk a little bit more about when did you move more from personal use and living in this incredible life and writing about things to really getting involved in trying to the activism side of things, seeing that things were wrong and knowing that you can make a difference?
My means of expression has been writing always. So I wrote books, I wrote articles, and there was one article for which an anti-marijuana crusader sued me for libel. And that's really when
The whole thing changed.
I had to fight. Just writing wasn't good enough anymore.
So you were sued by someone for writing the truth, basically.
Yes.
And when you say an anti-marijuana campaigner, is this the gentleman who was at the WHO at the time? Or is this a separate case entirely?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
So you went through various fights in your life, one of which was against with the gentleman who was working at the WHO. So the World Health Organization was.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is this the same person, or is this a whole separate battle you were involved in?
This is the one. And he was a counselor to the American president and to the French president as well.
Yeah. So he wasn't just an anti-marijuana person. He was actually involved in the system.
He was a very important person. He did a lot. to bring in misconceptions about marijuana.
Which are very damaging, like very, not just talking about it and saying it's from the media, he's actually able to change kind of what was actually being done in terms of policy and stuff. It's very, very damaging. And you chose to take a different opinion to him and tell the truth effectively.
So since the trial was going to happen, I had to use it to serve the cause, and that is, I had to use it to show how he was twisting science for his cause.
Mm-hmm. So he was essentially using bias opinion within the research that was coming out, which now is known as unacceptable. It's not. You wouldn't be able to get away with this nowadays, I don't think.
Yes,
you're looking at.
You do get away with it.
Oh, really?
It's exactly what's happening, not with cannabis, but with the whole farce we're in right now.
Right. So it's bias science, effectively, or yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but so you were able to take this guy, this gentleman, he was actually a PhD scientist. He wasn't, but he was also completely muddying the waters and using his position to make the war on drugs harder, make the research in cannabis almost impossible in the WHO. The reason the research was impossible for so long was that WHO wouldn't change the schedulization of the drug and allow research to happen. That's why we're so behind. And this gentleman was part of that. So you basically got into a battle with him and effectively won.
I got as close to winning as I could, which is that I was condemned to pay 1 franc.
1 franc. Which is the court saying you earn the right, effectively. I believe.
Society being the way it was at the time, I really couldn't dream of getting closer to winning.
Yeah, of course. It's a massive victory.
There was a lot of report of the case in the media, so I really felt that I accomplished.
100%. It was a huge victory. And you would put yourself at huge risk financially at this point. I mean, you're being very modest, but really it was a serious thing. You could have really had a lot of problems from this.
It was a huge amount of work getting the right people to come to testify. And there were very few at all who were prepared. It's just not done in the scientific world to say, yes, this guy is telling us rubbish.
Yeah, who is a very important man.
You keep quiet.
Yeah, because
But he had really gone too far, so I was able to. There were, in particular, a couple of Australian researchers who made a piece of research showing how the man we were talking about was distorting science, distorting evidence when he reported on research.
Yeah. I think now we know very much. Now we have the research 20 years later, we really do know that this was, at the time, it was totally incorrect. But they chose to pick on you, thinking that they would win, I believe, and they chose the wrong person, I think. The wrong person to go to a fight with. So at this stage now, now you're an activist. Now people know who you are. Now other people in the cannabis community around the world are looking at you and saying, okay, here's a person who's battling with the authorities, who's writing, who's not just smoking pot and having fun about it. They're actually working in the good fight. You started to meet some unbelievable people. Were you still in Canada at this time? Were you living in Canada in the wilderness still, or do you?
Well, both. I was sometime in. The thing that really made a difference to me is that High Times created the first Cannabis Cup. and it took place in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam is very close to Paris. And so it meant I was invited to the Cup, as well as many great people from all over the United States.
And this is the first cup.
The first Cup, there were about 30 people in all.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Because for so many people here listening and watching, and many people will, their first great experience in the cannabis world would have been going maybe to the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. To the first cup, there was 30 people, and you were there. Can you describe how it was? What was the first cup like? I've met Steve. I've met some of the people that you know, but I've never asked anybody what was the first cup like in Amsterdam.
The first Cup, well, there were 3 guys who started an outfit which they called the CIA for cannabis in Amsterdam. And it took place on the first floor of an old building. And they had some hemp clothes and a bit of everything related to the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were invited. I was. Jack Herer was. A number of people whose names escape me right now.
I'm not, especially after having gone to so many cannabis cups.
Exactly.
I think we'll have there's some photographs somewhere of you at many of the cups. There's been a few that you're at, but certainly some of the early ones. And it really was the A to Z of the original guys. We saw there's a beautiful photograph of you and Jack Herer.
Yes.
And some of these guys and some of the ladies as well, the original lady, on pioneers in the industry. So, to go to the first cup is something special. So this explains maybe to people in the chat what we're talking about.
And then gradually, from one year to the next, it grew, the Cup, and it became glamorous, which was something incredible when you came from Paris, where prohibition was still very much on and hard.
And strict in Paris as well, strict in France.
And it came to the point where 2,000 people came from the United States to take part. And it was so festive. It was great.
Yeah.
And that's how I met Neville, of course.
Yeah. His early days.
And Neville was a born breeder. And someone who was doing breeding on different plants and animals before he started breeding marijuana.
How did you meet him? Did you meet him in a bar? Were you in one of the rooms and he walked in and you sat down and talked? What was your first experience with Neville?
It escapes me.
Yeah, that's okay. It's one of these things. Neville is almost an enigma in the industry. He's someone
I was very close to him. We were very close to one another. And he's really one of the few men in my life that really made a difference. And not only did he have great smoke, his NL5As remains one of the best ever, as far as I'm concerned, and his Neville Haze as well. But besides that, he turned me on to a number of subjects that were to become really important in my life, like channeling. He turned me on to Seth, who started being channeled in the 70s and is incredibly rich when it comes to make you sense the complexity of the multiverses.
Yeah. He was certainly a man who had many levels and depth, as many people in the industry are, and certainly from a generation, I think, before. I think people are much more spiritual, much more in connection and seeing the world in a little bit different way. I think the industry maybe now is a little different, the way people get into it. But Neville was one of my heroes, absolutely one of my heroes, is one of my heroes. And the Neville's Haze, I sat in Amsterdam one day and smoked Neville's Haze when I was quite young and spent the rest of the day walking around all the museums, and one of the most amazing experiences as a young person. And
Very philosophical.
yeah, and artistic and thoughtful, and just and as a man, as well. So Neville's is a special human, and it sounds like he touched your life very deeply. And so you and so many more people as well at this time. You were really then getting into the industry itself and the sort of building of the industry, the early days. You've got Ben Dronkers. You've got so. I mean, we start. I actually have a list of people that I know as friends, and it's overwhelming. There's so many people on this list of friends of yours and people that you work with, the people you cared about. That I'm not going to say them all because they're your friends, but it's everyone. It's everyone in the industry. There's a lovely picture of you and Howard.
Howard was a dear friend also.
One of life's very special people. Like all of these people, actually, Jack, Jorge, I'm going to Ed, Ben Drock. They're all special people. They're all people who took risks. They saw something happening earlier on. They decided not to be part of the system and not give in. I know from personal experience, sometimes you choose to take a path and the people around you don't accept it or don't support you. It takes a certain sort of person to carry on in areas, and all these people are very important. Actually, at this point, Mila is a woman. I met Mila in Switzerland in the late 90s, I think. I sat in a farm with her when it was snowing, and we had barrels stuffed into the snow with her first sets of bags, stripping the plants into the bags. And she taught me to make bubble water hash, isolator hash at the time.
Yes,
before
she taught many people.
Yeah, I mean, really, with total freedom, total happiness, and before it was refined. And she really is a pioneer of a science, really. And I hope she gets recognition.
But have you seen her book?
I have. Actually, I need to get a copy of it and read it, but I have seen her book, and we should.
We're her publisher.
You're publishing this, okay? So you've definitely get a copy of this, and maybe try and get something on the website, because she's like yourself. She's one of these people who's done so much. But the water hash, so in America, different world, different society, different scene now, but it's such a massive thing. Isolator, bubble water hash, whatever you want to call it. Mila was sat in farms in Switzerland trying to work out this system for a long time, and I see she's a friend of yours.
Yes, I remember every cannabis cup, she took us into her kitchen and showed us her newest invention.
Yeah, the newest toy or the newest thing she'd worked out.
It started with the washing machine.
Do you remember this? Yeah.
The tumbler. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. People are still using this. They're still using it now. This separation system. A lot of people claim that it's there, but the separation system is so simple and so beautiful. And I truly believe that Mila was the opening of the door for so many people. And I think the guys who know, they know. Mila was there.
She popularized.
Yeah.
Really, she brought hashish into Europe in a way.
Yeah, and certainly changed the cannabis cup, because suddenly there was this people starting to go, I have my weed, but I also have of my weed and water style, and
changed the cannabis world.
Okay. Speaking of this, I think it would be wrong of us not to mention Frenchie. It's a very, very sad, like an absolute loss. I was devastated to find this. Yeah, exactly. Frenchie Cannoli, one of the true, beautiful humans in our society, in our scene, and I don't want to go into a big talk about who Frenchie was. That's for another. He's a friend of yours, and I know he's a friend of the entire community. And this is like Mila, like many of the people, lived his entire life living in the mountains in India, in Nepal, in Morocco, before he even thought about anything that we know him for now. He lived because he loved it. He lived there making and learning and working and learning the languages and the culture. And then many years later, as the scene opened up in America, he happened to be in the right time to teach his skills.
Some of the way the French look at wine, bring that to hashish.
Les appellations de contrôler.
And I learned from him that hashish, if it's stored properly, can become better as it ages, like wine. Which
Absolutely.
is interesting.
Absolutely. In the coffee shops in Amsterdam, it was one of the things we had a problem with, or a situation with storage and long-term storage. And when you have a very beautiful hashish of different types, such as India or live resin or Moroccan style, which I know French had an interest in, all of these things, as you store it, depending on the temperatures, it changes. And it's an amazing thing. And sometimes it changes for the better, and sometimes it changes for the worse. And it's only through the knowledge that someone like Frenchie has over like 20, 30 years of understanding this more, that actually we pay more attention and now understand more. We should store this one in cold temperature. We let this one come to room temperature for some period of time. I learned so much from this man and his freedom, his free videos, his books, it's a very, very
person.
Yeah, it's one of the special people. But he's left an amazing.
We wish him well in his travels.
He will be with many friends, and he's left an incredible legacy. And a lot of war memories. But we should have more of him, to be honest. But it's a little sad way of finishing that. But you've known all these people, and most are still going strong and fighting the good fights. But along the way, we lose a few of our champions. And Frenchie was the most recent, and it's very, very sad. But as you say, we wish him well on his journey. We'll speak to him again soon, I'm sure. So I have a few more questions I want to ask you, and they get a little bit deep, and I hope you don't mind too much. It's more about your life, and it's what do you think is your for you, like, what's the outstanding memory of your life as you look back and you think about all the things you've done and all the people you've met in life? In retrospect,
you mean what's the most meaningful in the end?
For you, not about cannabis, but just for you.
Being a mother.
Yeah.
I didn't want, for a long time I thought I would never want to have children. And then when it came on me, it was really strong. And when I became a mother, that's what I did for a few years. And
changes.
And it's the strongest and most rewarding thing I did.
It's a beautiful answer. What advice would you give to younger people who find your story inspirational? Because a lot of people here are going to listen to this and watch this in the future, and they're going to see your life and the amazing things you've done. What is your advice to young people who want to go on an adventure?
Do what excites you. Forget about what your mind tells you. Do what makes you vibrate. Because when you follow your heart, really you follow your higher self. And you can't go wrong. When you follow your mind, it can tell you all sorts of things that you shouldn't listen to, contrary to what we're taught.
Yeah, it's good advice as well. Very good advice. A little bit to also be remiss of me not to mention the fact that you have a cannabis strain named after you, Michka. I was about to forget this entirely. When does it happen? A few years ago, someone rang you up from Sensi and said, "By the way, Michka, we're naming a cannabis seed after you." It's pretty unusual.
Well, they got in touch with me and told me that they were thinking about it and would I agree. I like the photo, this cannabis photo a lot.
Yes, it's fantastic.
And I said, yes, it would be an honor, but on condition that it's the sort of cannabis that I like.
Absolutely.
It would be terrible to have a weed with my name and I didn't like it.
It's very good that you demanded this as well. Imagine this.
And so they worked on it, and they knew I like haze above all. They worked on it, and then when it was ready, I went to Amsterdam to try it, and I loved it.
Fantastic. Imagine what they were feeling before you arrived, and just wondering and like worrying. You know, is this going to be right? I'm sure they knew already it was going to be what you liked, but imagine this nervousness. It's like a good wine or some nice food you give to someone, and it must have been very nerve-wracking for them.
It was very exciting for me.
Yeah. And it's called Michka. It's called Michka. It's at Sensi Seeds, yeah?
Yes, and it has a very clear high. It's really creative. It's really good for writing or playing music or whatever you like to do.
It's a lovely up sativa. I need to get some from somewhere. I'll find a way, I'm sure. I have a couple more questions here. I want to talk a little bit about the books you brought out recently as well, but I'm going to a couple more questions on. I don't know which way to start these two. There's two questions of the same question. It's a little bit because I try to stay away from the kind of cannabis politics really on this podcast because I wanted to talk more about yourself and your life because I think that's a little, more interesting for me than cannabis politics, which we talk about all day long. What are your thoughts on certainly like how things have gone in America and Canada? Looking back from your early days when you first started smoking and realizing that cannabis should not be illegal to where they've got to now in Canada and America, and whether it's gone too far or too commercial, what's your thoughts on that? And also what your thoughts are on Europe at the moment and the state of Europe. It's a big question, but
in a way, I think we made a mistake in asking for legalization. And what we should have asked for was decriminalization. Because legalization means a whole set of rules. It's legal if you do this, if you don't do that, if.
Yeah, it becomes suddenly all about, like you say, with rules and regulations, and you can't have this much, and you can do this, and you have to have this tested, and as opposed to just, okay, you can have a few plants. Problems are solved.
Do what you like.
Yeah, it's your own. Like you said,
it's Ed Rosenthal who talked a lot at one point about what he called the tomato model.
Absolutely.
Meaning that a lot of people grow tomatoes. It's the plant food that's most grown by people. A lot of people buy tomatoes. Tomatoes are sold and they're bought.
Mm-hmm.
There is no rule about it. I think it's a great model.
It's a beautiful analogy. If anyone doesn't know about this, Ed talks about this in a fair few podcasts, other people as well. The principle being, it's like a fruit. It's like a food substance. You should be able to put a few in the greenhouse and it's not regulated. You shouldn't have to worry about how much your plant produces or, what you do and don't do with it. It's a great analogy. And I heard you talk about this before with the tomato plant analogy of this is where we should all be.
And it seems to me that free access to plants, any plant, is a birthright of all living beings. And this is really something I'm prepared to fight for now, is free access to plants.
And to all plants. Yeah.
All plants.
It's a good fight. It's strange because we're almost there. I see it collecting plant genetics around the world when I do my traveling. It's only the plants that are the war on drug plants that they care about. Anything else they don't care about. And unless you discover a new plant that has drug-like properties as they're concerned, then suddenly they care about this plant. It's a strange thing. They do plants genetics are generally left alone, but as soon as it's a war on drugs plant of any kind, it's yeah. What do you think about the European situation? I mean, you're based in France. You know far more about the French situation. As a country that's known for sort of egalitarianism, for freedom and liberation and social movements, why is it that France seems to not be the front runner in Europe? Where I would always have thought in the past France will be the country that will probably move faster. What is the situation? Why is and it seems very strict.
I think the attachment of French people to wine has something to do with it, because cannabis comes from a different world, from a different culture. It's a different high from wine.
But I know so many French people who smoke, and whenever I used to visit, my dad was living in France for many years, and I used to spend a lot of my time down there. Every village I went to, I would meet people in the bar, and after a few conversations, you would realise these people are going for a smoke around the corner, and I shall go and join them. Everywhere I went, there was, and in the community, it was accepted. These people were not being persecuted. It was just, but as a larger society, it hasn't taken any movement, and yet still people are being persecuted.
It's taking a long time. It's going to happen. I think it's bound to happen everywhere in the Western world now. The ball is rolling. It's more a case of how long is it going to take, and not a case of is it going to happen or not.
Do you think the police in France, so in the UK, what we're seeing now is that the police and the courts are slowing down their aggressiveness, even though the laws have not changed? They're just generally slowing down the aggressiveness towards it as a plant and for personal use.
Yes, there's a general awareness from the public that it's not what they've been taught. It's not as bad as they've been taught, let's say.
Good. One last question I want to ask you, because I think the best person I could possibly ask this to really is, it's about the major world governing bodies. It's a big question. I know it's not really what you like talking about, but what is going on with the major world governing bodies? So now, one of your big fights was someone who is involved in the WHO, the World Health Organization, but we have the UN, NATO, whatever. What is the situation now, do you think, with the big government, world governing bodies? Are they moving in the same direction, or is there still holding back because of things like the WHO?
Are we talking about cannabis, or are we talking
cannabis specifically? But maybe you have a broader knowledge of other things that are worth talking about.
Well, my point of view is that drug policies for decades they've been imposed to the world by the US. They went further than any other Western countries into the drug war, and so they were the first to realize that it was a dead end. And now they're, in a way, showing the world by legalizing in so many states that it's quite possible to have a safe society with legal cannabis. So it's bound to diffuse in the Western world. And so I'm not so interested anymore in looking at the detail of what country or what state is going that way, because there is news every day. And I just know that it's happening.
Yeah. I think there's less fear. What I see from my work and my travels is there's less fear from countries, literally. And there's less financial implications. If you do relax your laws, in the past, you would lose funding on various programs and things. And that's not happening so much. Morocco being a perfect example, who are no longer in fear of legalizing for industrial and medical. And so the world is changing fast. And a lot of it's because the pressure from America seems to have stopped. But to have seen what you've seen, and to have started at the beginning, really, like I say, the first book was published in 1978. And if we look back to these sort of very liberal years, and it wasn't really a big thing, and people were fairly 60s and 70s. People seemed, my parents' generation seemed pretty relaxed about everything. They didn't take it very seriously, and suddenly it got serious in the 80s. Suddenly people really suddenly got this sort of negative, heavy duty thing going on, and
governments got scared basically of this wind of change that was coming with marijuana. Mm-hmm. The hippies were the first white Westerners to bring marijuana home, which was really a turning point.
And then also the mix of cannabis and politics scared people. It was these two ideas, this people who are going to ignore the rules, liberate their minds, and be politically interested in what's happening and socially motivated, and very scary for people who have been in the positions of structural power for a long time. So, but fascinating to have seen it and been there and to live it. And God, I'm so jealous that when I look at the photographs of your cabin in Canada, and it's just such a beautiful life you had, and your kids and your family. You know, you guys look amazing, and really, a beautiful, beautiful life. Let's have a little talk more about what you're doing now. So you run very successful business, and you've helped a lot of authors and people write. And you're publishing in I think predominantly like French and English, but in general, talk about what your company's doing more. And I know that you have 2 books out at the moment that are really interesting. Would you like to tell everyone what your publishing company does?
We have some books on cannabis, like we have Mr. Nice, and we have Mila's and some others, and my books. By the way, I'm going to show you what my book looks like.
This is a fantastic book, guys. I really, really, you guys need to read this. I haven't got all the way through, but you need to read this. It's
on the screen. You have the French version, and I'm showing you the English version.
Yeah. And what you've actually very kindly given us 2 of these that are signed in French and English, and we're going to have a giveaway. I didn't want to start talking about giveaways during this talk because it was too important, but we've got a little giveaway going on, guys. And Michka's got 2 of these books that are signed French and English, and we'll make sure they go to the right language-speaking people. You've also got a book out at the moment, a medical cannabis book, and I noted that one of the authors that you work with on this book is the professor that he discovered THC and CBD as a molecule base. Is that correct? Am I?
Meshulam.
Wait, explain a little bit about this book and these people.
It's a book where I wrote the introduction basically, and I got in touch with people great discoverer in the field of medical marijuana, and each wrote a piece.
Yeah, you put this book. The book looks brilliant. I'm going to get a copy of it and read it myself. I think anyone who has a deep medical understanding or wants to know more, then this book looks like probably going to become one of the most important books you need to read on the subject. And Michka's biography is absolutely critical. I wasn't aware that Mr. Nice was on your publishing, but it makes perfect sense. And Howard, I have a very deep love of, and another person I miss very dearly. But we used to look after his book stands, funny enough, at some of the shows. So when I first met Tom at Seedsman,
it was one of the first books we published, actually.
Yeah, it all makes. I think I probably met you at a show at some stage. I'm fairly sure, but so many people that you've published, and so many I know there's so many people who couldn't publish in other places have published with you. So, guys, go and have a look at Michka's publishing house. I'm sure we'll put a link up, and we'll make sure that everyone has access to see where Michka's book, all the different books that she publishes, and they're in French language as well as English and other languages, I'm sure as well. So, thank you so much for doing that on its own. Just giving availability to people and allowing people to be published, because it was in the 80s and 90s there was no internet. You couldn't get a grow guide. You know, Ed Rosenthal's and Jorge's grow guides were the 2 books were pretty much the Bibles, and it was paper versions only. And if it wasn't for companies publishing these things and taking risks,
I remember you mentioned Ed Rosenthal, and I remember how I met Neville.
Okay.
It was Ed Rosenthal when at one Cannabis Cup, he said to me, whispering, "I'm going to see Neville. Do you want to come with me?" And I had no idea who Neville might be. But of course I said yes.
When Ed tells you something.
And at the same time, at the time he was living at the so-called Cannabis Castle. But the way to where he was hidden.
Mm-hmm.
He was still not wanting to be,
Of course.
because
The Cannabis Castle, for guys in the chat and who are watching, Cannabis Castle is where Ed Dronkers and Sensi Seeds built their seed business up, but it's a secret. Well, not so secret later on, but at the time it was the mothership of cannabis production in Amsterdam and seed production in Amsterdam, and all the people who would come into Amsterdam who were a little bit connected would come to the Cannabis Castle. So Ed took you along there to meet some random guy called Neville.
And so Neville put some marijuana on the table and offered me if I wanted to roll something. And I was not familiar with Sinsemilla, so I didn't know what to do.
No seeds in it. Couldn't do rubbing.
So I think Ed rolled.
And this is your first Sinsemilla or something like this, similar?
I smoked it before, but I never had it in my hands before.
Okay. This is a unbelievable moment. So you're sitting there with Ed Rosenthal smoking Neville's Sinsemilla. It's looking back on it now. What an amazing moment. And that was the moment. Do you think you knew then that was sativa was for you?
Yes, I really loved it.
Yeah. I want to ask you, you've given us so much of your time and I'm really grateful. And I would like to talk more and more about who you met at the Cannabis Castle and who else took you to these places and talk about Howard all day. I could talk to you so much about these people you know. You have so many incredible stories, I'm sure, about each of them, and important stories as well. You know, you spent amazing time with everyone and really kind of valuable. I saw you talk about one thing that's kind of important, or personally important to me, and it's about tobacco and cannabis. And, you know, I'm someone who struggles with, I smoke joints. I like joints, but mixed. And I saw you talk about, you know, actually it's quite important probably for people who do it in Europe. You know, in Europe it's quite common. What was your advice to people who are, you know, smoking cannabis and tobacco? I think it was sort of separate.
Of course, I started smoking in Canada and in North America. As you know, the tradition is to smoke cannabis pure, without tobacco. And that's how I liked it, because I started out that way. And it made me realize when I came to Europe, where the tradition is to mix, that a problem with mixing is that a lot of people think they want to smoke cannabis, whereas in fact it's the coal of tobacco. So I think it makes for a better relationship with cannabis to smoke it separate from tobacco. I'm not saying don't smoke tobacco. I'm saying smoke them separately.
I think it's fantastic advice. And it's literally like, have your cigarettes here and have your joint here, but understand the relationship and understand your desire is for this and for this. Yes. When it's mixed, it becomes difficult to understand what you're doing. And
exactly,
I think it's fantastic advice. And yeah, it's something that I saw you say. Would you mind if we take a couple of minutes to take a few questions from chat? Are you okay to take 3 or 4 minutes? You know, you've given us so much of your time. So guys, thank you for kicking back and, you know, and not spamming chat with questions. But if you would like to ask Michka a few questions now, we've taken too much of her time. So please get a few questions in, and it's a fairly unique opportunity to ask Michka a few questions. Michka, thank you so much for this. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your life story with us like this. It's been really
it's a pleasure.
enlightening. Again, like, guys, go and get Michka's autobiography. Biography. I'm going to get a copy myself. I have it, and I want a signed one. I'd actually quite like to enter the competition. So, and I think there's probably a lot of stories in there that you will be very happy to have picked up on. There was a few things that I looked at through as we were going through. I can't. If I try and scroll the chat, I'll cause a trouble here. But yeah, any questions, guys? If not, I'm going to let Michka go. She's been incredibly generous with her time here, and I'm being told to press a button. Question on screen. Oh, sorry. Where can I get more info on the books in Canada, Michka?
Well, I would have to get back to the office and ask them. I'm not good at telling you that sort of.
Do you have a website that people can check?
Yes, I have an email address also, which is Michka, Michka, at Mama Editions. It's MAMA and the word editions.com.
We have it on the screen right now, guys. So go and have a look at the website, and that should give you there's some fantastic books there, and really the authors there are some of the best in the industry. You probably would have known a lot of the books. When you go looking, you'll realize that you read lots of the books, and Michka's company is responsible.
We have the English-speaking part of our publishing business is called Mama Publishing.
Okay. So Mama Publishing, very famous company, guys, in the industry, but go and have a look at Mama Publishing, Mama Editions, and have a little look, and there's some great stuff on there. We've got one. What would you tell anyone that is on the fence about going to Amsterdam, maybe for the first time? I think they're asking if you haven't been to Amsterdam before, and obviously you went there very, very, in early days, the early Cannabis Cup.
Well, it's not as buoyant as it used to be. It's not as festive as it used to be, but you still have all these great coffee shops, or a great number of them. So I would say yes, go.
Do you remember when it was all paintings on the walls in the center of the city, and it was all squats and people was like flowers everywhere? Amsterdam was a very, very flowery socialist city when I first went there in the early days, and now it's a little bit different, and it's a little changed, but it's a fantastic place, and the coffee shops are fantastic, and the history of the cannabis industry is fantastic.
Go to the coffee shop are in the old part of town, which is really the nicest.
Yeah.
So you'll be in the right place.
Yeah. And try and visit the old places as well. Some are still there, and the names are still there. Go and have a look around.
And go to the Rijksmuseum. I visited the Rijksmuseum with Jack Herer, and he was seeing mushrooms into every painting.
Go with a fun friend. If you're lucky, go with Jack Herer. no, take a wonderful friend like Jack and go to the Rijksmuseum. The Amsterdam Museum, the museums there are beautiful. The art museums, the history museum there is one of the best I've ever been to. And walk the canals and have fun and enjoy this sort of, something you won't see in many other parts of the world right now, but soon coming, and maybe Amsterdam changing. There's a few questions here that I'm getting, but some of them may not be so present to you. Did you ever visit Christiania in Denmark? That's a good one from Miss Starless.
No, I never did.
No, I never went there. I had wonderful things about it. I think it went through some phases of being very wonderful and then being slightly overtaken by... This is the problem when you have prohibition and you have one place where it's liberal. Yes, it brings everyone to one place.
It's a small place as well.
Yeah, and it creates problems for the original people. So someone here, Akeem Tyson, saying... No question, but I want to say I appreciate what you and many others have done, raising awareness of cannabis worldwide and being one of the pioneers that fought the good fight and still fighting. I think that's a very, very shared view here, Michka, amongst all of us, certainly all of us in the office here. When we were doing an interview with you, there was a lot of very excited faces, and I know amongst friends, thanks, Akeem, that's a very nice thing to say. There's various just some... Michka, I think I've kept you for long enough. And I think you've given us a fantastic little insight into what you did and your adventures. I really, really appreciate you talking about your early years. And again, guys, if you've sparked an interest, go and have a look at the book. Some of your adventures when you were younger, Michka, kind of truly make me feel slightly of a novice. And I went some places. And the cabin building and bringing the kids up and then the fighting the good fight, and you're a very fierce, very strong lady, and I'm glad I never had to have an argument with you in the past. I look forward to seeing you when the shows open up again and we have a chance to all meet again. Seedsman's back on the road and you managed to have some shows. I look forward to seeing you at a show, and maybe we can have another quick chat one day. And
Okay, let's do that.
yeah, but thank you so much. You have a lovely evening, and thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you coming. Is there anything you'd like to say to anybody before we do go? Is there anything you'd like to say?
Do what you like to do, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michka. Bye-bye. Enchante. Thank you. Guys, wow. Just wow. I'm a little bit starstruck and a little bit blown away, I'll be honest with you. That is one of my big heroes. And I think for a lot of people, yeah, and if you didn't know who Michka was before this little interview and little podcast stream we were doing, you certainly do now. And she is a pretty incredible woman. Her personal life outside cannabis has been just mind-blowingly inspirational. And her fight when she did get into it, we didn't go too much into cannabis on purpose. She's talked a lot in the past about stuff. But she really went for it, and she took these people to task, and she didn't give up, and she ended up in fights with people that no one else would take, with the WHO, with big professors who had big reputations, and she went, no, I won't have this. You're lying, or you're using the wrong science. And on top of that, then supported huge numbers of people in the industry that you now know who they are, with the books and the writing and the whole thing. So thank you so much, Michka, for coming along and sharing a bit more of your personal life. And guys, thank you also for coming along and sharing with us. It's going to be I think that will go down in the Seedsman sessions and the general industry as a really informative chat. And I'm glad that she shared that with us and with you. So thank you very much. We've got a load of stuff coming up down the line. Don't forget, there is a giveaway for these books of Michka's and some seeds. There'll be some links going up. Michka's been incredibly kind to give us a couple of those signed copies. I'm actually going to steal one of them myself if I could. But have a look out for that. Check the Seedsman website for the usuals. There's always freebies and silver giveaways. I think there's a high THC promo going on right now. If you go and have a look, you'll see some stuff going on with that. But I think we're going to keep these sessions to just talking to amazing, amazing people and keeping it to the chats. And I really appreciate you guys for coming along, and the Seedsman guys for putting these things on. In the next few weeks to a few months, we have some really amazing interviews as well coming up, which we'll give you some notifications about. But again, as it's been going, it's the same. Some of the best people in the industry who are putting their time aside to talk us about their time and how they influenced what we now see as normal. So guys, once again, thank you very much. Have a safe evening. I hope you're all well and safe. All the guys at Seedsman send their love and care to all of you, and hope you're all happy. And we will see you with the next Seedsman session in the near future. Thank you very much again for your time. Thank you, Michka.